Hello students. So I gave you the pop quiz yesterday, and a lot of you struggled with how to do the program, and so I wanted to take some time to go through it line by line and step by step, explaining what I'd done and what I'd like to see in your future projects. So that's what this video is about. I'm going to start from scratch and do this. Okay, so first let's go to File. Let's click New. We're going to do a new project. And make sure this is Visual Basic, Windows Desktop, and Windows Format. Now, let's go ahead and do this right the way I'll be expecting your homework. Your last name, underscore, and then the project. So in this case, let's just do Pop Quiz 1. Once your form loads, let's go ahead and create all the items that we'll need. So let's do the label. We're going to need a checkbox and a button. Let's go ahead and move all this stuff down a little bit. Left a little. Put another label. Move this down a little bit. Okay. Let's rename the label text and say area of a square or a circle. Okay. All right, so we have our basic little application created. It's going to go take the area of a square or circle. X is going to represent either a side of the square or it's going to represent the radius of a circle, depending on which area we're calculating. And I'm going to clean up just a little bit. Okay, so I just went ahead and cleaned this up a little bit. For this text box, I don't want users to be able to input anything, so I'm going to go to read only, and I'm going to say true. and then that is going to be for my output. All right, now we're ready. Click F7. That takes us straight to the code, and we're ready to start working here. First thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to go Shift F7 to go back, or just click your this part here, the Form 1 FB design, because I'm going to want to start with my event handler. So click Submit, the Submit button, and that creates the event handler. So now I have my event handler, private subroutine button 1 click, and this was automatically created when I double clicked on the Submit button. We're going to push that to the bottom. I like to put my event handlers at the bottom. I also like to comment them. So, because as you build things, you're going to have different event handlers, and so you want to make sure that you always know what they do. All right, let's code. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and well, let's go here. I'm going to comment this out for now because I'm going to create a subroutine that's going to be called get area, and right now that doesn't exist, but it will. Okay, so let's create that subroutine. Okay, so at this point, I've created the private subroutine get area. There's nothing there, but we're going to create it. Now we can uncomment this because it exists. We can come back up to the get area subroutine, and now let's create some variables. All right, so what I did here is I created the first variable. I went ahead and just called it var. You can name these variables anything you want. Var just for me just stands for variable. So I'm declaring it in Visual Basic. We have to declare our variables with the prefix dim. So dim variable. We have to tell it what the data type is. I'm going to use decimals because I want people to be able to enter decimals, and also I want my calculations to be decimals. So decimal. And then, so we declared it, and I'm going to go ahead and initialize it here on the same line here, and we're going to initialize it to the text box 1 text. So what that means, anything that's entered into this text box, this is text box 1, is going to be this right here, text box 1 text. It's going to be assigned to the variable var. All right. We need another variable. And I'm going to explain all this in a moment here. Okay, so what happened here is, I already explained this variable. This one here is dim, on line 6, is dim a as decimal. So I'm going to need a variable that's going to represent the area that was calculated. So that's going to be a, and in the next thing I want to do is I want to know what happened with checkbox 1. Is it checked or is it not checked? So let's go back and take a look at checkbox 1, and let's go ahead and save this, by the way. Okay, so here's checkbox 1 right here, circle. And so I want to know, was this checked or was this not checked? Because that's going to determine which calculation I use. Am I using the calculation to calculate for a square or the calculation to calculate for a circle? Which formula am I going to use? Well, I have to check this checkbox. I have to see what the status of it is before I can do that. So that's what's happening here. So the subroutine gets called, getArea gets called. I declare my variables. I initialize the first variable because I know that's going to be set to text box 1. And the next thing I'm going to do is select is go ahead and check the checkbox. Test the checkbox to see what the status is. So the way you do that is checkbox 1 dot checked, and that just means is it checked or is it not checked. If it's checked, it's going to return true. If it's not checked, it's going to return false. And then in these cases, I'm going to want to call some other things that I haven't created yet. So I know that if it's true, I'm going to want to call a function that I'm going to call area circle. Now the reason I'm commenting it out is because this doesn't exist yet. So the reason that so I went ahead and I created this this function, which it doesn't exist yet, is area circle, because that's what's going to happen if it's checked. And you'll see that the variable is var. They're on line 10, and I'm just passing it whatever was in text box 1. So whatever was assigned, the user entered into text box 1 is var, and I'm going to pass that to the function area circle var right here, so that it can do the calculation for the function of area of a circle and area of a square. And that's it for my subroutine. My subroutine at this point is nearly done. The only thing I need to do more for my subroutine is go ahead and return my calculation that's performed in the functions for circle or square. So I'm going to want to return that in text box 2. And that's it. So now, once we've checked the checkbox, it's either true or false. We've selected our calculation. We ran our calculation, and now that has been returned. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set text box 2 dot text to A. Now A hasn't been assigned yet, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. Okay. So one of the things I teach all my students is compile as you code. So right now I have a bunch of code here. I've done a bunch of things on this thing too. So I want to go ahead and compile and make sure this thing works. And there it is. It ran. It's here. Nothing's going to happen because there's nothing going on yet. But we'll go ahead and stop it right now. And the reason this exception handed, by the way, let me explain this exception real quick. I have not. This is a really raw code. It was designed to be just a pop quiz. So there's no exception handling. There's no validation code. There's nothing extra. So when I clicked to run this and I clicked that submit button, it actually tried to run with a null value. There was nothing entered in the entry box for a variable, and so a null value can't be converted to a decimal or even to a text. So that's why this exception happened. If we had entered an actual input, this wouldn't have happened. But in any case, the code works. We're good to go. All right, so what's next? We need to start building our functions. So let's go ahead and do the area of a circle first. Now, this doesn't need to be public, so I'm going to go ahead and set that to private. All private means is that it's only accessible within this class. So we're not going to access this function from anywhere else, so there's no reason to set it to public. Okay. We need a variable. And we need another variable. Now this was something that I was really hoping to see someone do, but that's okay. That's why we're here, is to learn, was to set something as a constant. And since pi, which we're going to use for calculating the circle area, is a constant, we're going to want to go ahead and assign that as a constant. Now we'll do the area. There we go. So there you have it. We have done the function for a circle. We created a private function called area of a circle. We're going to accept an input, some type of functions, a variable that we're going to call decimal. We're going to assign it the data type decimal. Once that has come in, once this function has been called and it's been passed some variable, now we're going to take a new variable, and we're going to declare it as a, and we're going to create the constant pi and set it to 3.14. Of course, you could make this, you could extend this out to more decimal places for accuracy, but this is good enough for our purposes. And then we have our little formula. Okay, so the formula for area of a circle. Area equals pi times var, whatever was passed, raised to the second power, which is the area of a circle. And we're going to return a. That's it. So the variable we declared up here, a, is now set to the formula for pi using the variable that was passed to this function, raised to the second power, area of a circle, and return a. That simple. So at this point, we can actually test our area of a circle. Let's go ahead and do that. So here's our little calculation. Let's go ahead and enter the number 4. We're going to check circle because we're going to use that function. Submit. Oh, didn't work. Okay, so this is fine. Let's troubleshoot and see what happened. Okay, so what happened here is when we look at this, so let's do that again. We entered 4, we hit circle, submit, we get 0. Let's go ahead and stop the compiler. And what happened here is I forgot to uncomment the function for area of a circle. So let's uncomment that, and let's run it. Do that again. And there it is, area of a circle. Perfect. We'll stop. Let's create the next function. Let's open this up a little more. Now this one's going to be area of a square, which is going to be really easy somehow. I did public again, just out of habit, because we're actually looking for private. All right, so we have our function. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this up a little bit and just say raised to the second power, because that's really what that is. Okay, so let's save this. And now we have our function for calculate area of a square. It's a private function called area of a square. I'm going to use, we're going to declare a variable as decimal, and that's just whatever the variable that we're going to pass in. And now we're going to have a new variable called a, which is going to stand for area. So on line 34, we declare it dim A as decimal, the data type is decimal, and then on line 36 we have what A is going to equal. A is going to equal whatever was passed, var raised to the second power, so the area of a square, and then we're going to return A. That's it. Very simple. Now let's go ahead and clean up our code. Let's always get rid of the extra space, make sure everything's nice and pretty. And there you have it. You have our class, our private subroutine, get area. I already explained all this with a select statement that checks the checkbox, then calls our functions depending on what the status of the checkbox was, and our two functions, our area of a circle, area of a square, our subroutine. And I typically do a little bit of cleanup for readability. Always remember, when you're writing code, the main thing you want is you want it to become modular, so it makes sense, nice and clean like this, well documented, so you can look at this and know exactly what's going to happen. Before I even look at code, I know, oh, this is the calculate area of a circle, this is calculate area of a square, this is my submit event handler, nice and clean. And that makes things very easy to debug. And believe me, when you get into industry, it's all about debugging. You want it clean, easy to debug, and modular. So yes, you could have written this all in one subroutine, made it very, very efficient, very, 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 very clean, but it would be difficult to debug if something was to go wrong, which always does with larger projects. So just keep in mind, this is for even though this could have been very much easier and simpler, I did it in this format for training purposes. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this thing and see what happens. And so we have our form. Let's go ahead and use the number 4 again. We're going to say it's a square this time, so let's submit. There's 16. Let's click circle, submit again, and there's our area of a circle. Fine. Another thing you could do too, which is kind of cool, is we can do what's called regions. I do this all the time. We can say, okay, let's do a region, and so you do your hashtag, type in the keyword region here, and then here I usually name it whatever the function is, or whatever the function or procedure is. And so you can do something along those lines, and you always have to have an ending for it. So, and it's just a keyword and a region, and then you just do that. And then U17, I'll have to play with that a little bit. So in Visual Basic, the way that we do regions is a little bit different from the other programming languages in that you have to use these quotations. And so you see here I went ahead and typed in region using the little prefix hashtag, so hashtag region, and then quotations to say what it's going to be. And the purpose of regions is that you can collapse and organize your code better. So here you can see region calculate area of a circle, which is the function, and I'll just do that. I can do that again, the same concept with this region, which is it's kind of nice. I'll do this a lot when I'm coding, and so we'll go ahead and just show you an example of this. And it needs the full quotation, so let's do that. Of course, you always have to have an end region. And there you go. Another thing you can do is I usually will submit, I'll put all my event handlers in one region. Clean that up a little bit. Go ahead and put our subroutine in region 2 while we're at it. Now with the subroutines, I'll usually do the whole little, the whole little, the whole method, so that way it's visible. So get area, and then there you have it. And let's see, the function is going to be the same way. Here I describe it. Probably to stay consistent with my naming convention, I probably should do this. Let's do that, and over here say and that would make more sense. Let's fix this one too. And the reason I do this is so that way, when I look at the region, I know exactly that that's going to be my method. I know what's in there without having to open it up. As these get more complicated, you can add more than one. For example, we'll get to the point where we have several event handlers, but I'm not going to put each one of them in their own region. I'll combine all of them in one area called event handlers and just leave it at that. Okay, so that's the whole project. There you go. You have the get area, you have the area of the circle, the two functions, my subroutine, the event handler. So event handler gets called on the button submit, calls the get area subroutine. The get area subroutine goes through, looks at the status of the checkbox, calls the appropriate function, and the two functions are written below, and that's it. We've done it. So now, when this is done properly, we are going to want to make sure that a user actually enters a number in here and not a letter or something else. We'll have to write validation code and all of that. But for just a simple pop quiz, this was good enough for our needs. Happy coding.